Hi, my name is Mason Duchatschek, and I want to welcome you to our show, Build a Tribe Live, where I have the privilege of interviewing thought leaders, authors, and experts in the fields of sales, marketing, both online and offline. And today's guest is Alan Minster, who is the co-author of the book, Sales Utopia, How to Get the Right People Doing the Right Things Enough Times. He's also been featured in the St. Louis Business Journal and also appeared on the cover of Selling Magazine. I've asked Alan to come in and visit with us today. He has provided services to about 850 companies, I guess it is, since what, 1992, I'm guessing.
Yep.
And helps them increase their sales revenue. He helps them increase the effectiveness of their marketing campaigns and get control over the sales process. And I basically invited Alan in today to tell us how he does that. And just so you know, Alan, the format's pretty simple. Just basically I have about 10 questions I'd like to ask of you, maybe a few follow-ups, and just be yourself and let us know what you think. Before we dive into the questions and the meat of the interview, my favorite thing to start off a show is really just to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself and why it is that you do what you do and why you're in the business you're in.
Sure. Well, I've been in professional selling for about 35 years, and I found that almost all salespeople struggle with several things. Number one, they get busy doing the business. They don't consistently fill their pipeline with new prospects. They do a horrible job of staying in touch with existing customers. They don't do a great job of cross-marketing. And so customers that are loyal customers that might be buying from you end up buying from competitors, and they say things like, gee, I didn't know you guys did that. The problem is with so many in sales is because it's such a activity-intense job that it's easy to confuse activity with productivity.
Sure.
And I found that in my professional selling career as well, is that I was bogged down doing details instead of spending my time with people that were qualified and interested. And what my job is now is to help salespeople focus and spend their time on those opportunities that are most likely to end up in sales. And that's what we talk about, sales process engineering, helping them figure out what is the process to engage and to close more business.
Okay. How have you seen the role of professional selling change over the years?
Well, I think what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, you almost have to go back before that. And to have a kind of a historical aspect about how selling got to where it was. And it's interesting, Tim Spears wrote a book several years ago called 100 Years on the Road. And as you can see, it's this itinerant salesman. And what happened was that after the Civil War, beginning of the Industrial Revolution, companies were able to produce goods like massive amounts, but they had no distribution and they had no sales and marketing. So the thought process was, let's hire a bunch of guys, we'll buy them a couple suits of clothes and a suitcase, and we'll put them out on the road with a sample kit, and they'll go around to every Middlesex village and farm, and they will basically explain who they are and what they do and take orders. And that's what they did, and it worked well. They got the word out, they sold their products. Well, then around the turn of the century, 2 companies, Burroughs and IBM, said we got to get smarter about that. And out of that came the birth of the salesman. This was the birth of the professional salesperson. And these companies told their salespeople what to say and how to say it and who to say it to. They took their pitch and they formalized it. They gave them answers to objections. They gave them closing techniques. They told them everything from how to dress to what to say. I mean, if you were working for IBM, you wore a blue suit, a white shirt, and a red tie. And again, it was standardized. Everything was standardized. And because the customer had few alternatives and was basically ill-informed, you could go in and you could tell them anything, and if you said it in a credible way, they'd believe you.
Right.
Well, the internet has changed that completely. I call somebody on the phone today, and for the last 5 years, and you'll hear click, click, click. They'll be Googling you while you're on the phone.
Sure.
People are better informed, they're smarter, and they're no longer looking for the guy with a smile and a shoe shine. Hail fellow, well met. They want someone who can be a business partner, who can help them facilitate buying decisions within their company. In fact, about 4 years ago, Mark Miller wrote a book called Selling is Dead. And what he's talking about is traditional selling. These things that these guys did for years and years that served them well no longer works. The customers are better informed than ever, and they've seen all the moves.
Sure. Speaking of moves and changes in the culture of sales, how would you, at this point in time, differentiate the difference between sales and marketing?
I thought for many years that sales and marketing were the same thing. But the analogy that probably helped me more than anything is the analogy of the farm or the garden, where marketing is about planting a garden in the springtime. You till the soil and you plant the seeds and you kill the bugs, and all season it grows. That's marketing. Sales is about harvesting. But the problem happens because so many times we send our salespeople out to harvest where there's been no crop planted, or our marketing is ineffective and sporadic, and so we throw a bunch of seeds in the ground, but because there is no consistent process to nurture that crop, somebody else ends up harvesting your crop. Today what you'll see is there's a lot of conflict between sales and marketing. Marketing will create a campaign or maybe run a very effective ad, and sure enough, people raise their hand and they want to know more, considered by marketing to be a hot lead. They then hand it off to sales, and they call this person, and their goal is to find two things. Number one, are they truly qualified to buy what they sell, and is the timing right? Marketing has done their job, which is building awareness. They've handed this lead off to sales, but the problem is if they are not ready to buy right now, and 72% of the time they're not ready to buy, just even if they raise their hand, they may be doing anything from an MBA research to a person who's just kicking the tires to somebody do due diligence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're sales ready.
Right.
And so what happens, because there's no process in the place to nurture those, the salesperson makes 2 or 3 calls, and then that lead drops off the end. So all the money that was spent to
Salespeople
generate,
just give up.
it's gone. And so that's, I think, also why so many advertising campaigns that could be fruitful are judged as ineffective, is because there's no process for staying in touch. Once you get the fact that most sales are made after 8 to 10 contacts, and most salespeople give up after 1 or 2, Mason, they have to.
Right.
A salesperson who's compensated and based and judged on their performance cannot keep going back and going back and going back to someone who may be qualified, but is not truly sales ready.
And they may end up doing more damage to a potential relationship anyway, because if they're not ready, they'll just consider the salesperson a pest.
That's exactly correct. And even in being pushy and hard and closing for the appointment alienates that prospective customer even more. And yet that's what these guys were trained to do, and a lot of salespeople are still out there doing it.
You know, we were visiting offline about the reset in the way businesses go to market. Could you tell your thoughts on that?
Well, part of it has to do with sales and marketing. I think marketing's #1 job in this market is to raise awareness of what they do. Sales' job is to really do 2 things. And the #1 thing they are to do is to determine if there is a fit between what the prospect needs and what the company provides. That is the first step in determining if this prospect is qualified, because so many times we spend time as salespeople, spend time on people that they're not really a fit.
Right.
And then the second thing is to determine where they are in their buying cycle. What is their timing really like? Because if you don't understand what their needs are, in other words, you're listening, you're talking instead of listening, and you don't know what their timeline is, it's impossible to be of any value to this person, and you will find yourself spending all kinds of time on deals that never close. In fact, I talk to managers every day that say, why are there so many opportunities on our forecast that have been on there forever? And I will tell them that it's almost always one of 2 things. Either they are not sales ready, they're talking to the wrong person, and there is no need for what they do. It's as simple as that.
What are some of the costs to a company of not having an automated sales and follow-up marketing system in place?
If you don't have a process, and that's really what we're talking about, is having a process, and not only having a process for prospecting, but for client contact, for cross-marketing, for staying in touch with referrals, what you end up with is a whole bunch of different people that are doing different things. The problem is, even when it works, you don't know why. And sales is not alchemy. It's not somehow that a bunch of stuff just happened to work out. Sales is a process where a prospect goes from being a suspect to a prospect to a qualified and interested prospect to a customer. Well, that process has to be managed.
And if you do it right, even not just from a customer, but to become an evangelist and an advocate that preaches the gospel of your company's products and services to everyone else they know on social media, and their networks as well. So I mean, it's
Yes.
A to Z.
So the thing that you really have to focus on is having a process means that if we have taken the time to figure out specifically who buys what we sell, and I don't mean this vague, everyone out there buys what we sell. No, really sit down and say, who is the target that we are going after? Who are we going to spend our time, our money, our effort, and our energy to attract into our business? Once both sales and management have worked together to determine what that target looks like and designs a process to stay in touch with those people, the idea, and it's a salesperson's dream, is to be in front of the prospect when they're ready to buy. If you do not have a process, what you end up with is a problem, and an expensive problem, because your salespeople spend all kinds of time doing things that are not high payoff activities.
Right. In your opinion, how big of a problem is missed opportunity for the customers and clients that you work with?
Because we only work with customers that are selling business to business through a direct sales organization, I believe that the cost of missed opportunity is the most expensive cost in any company that fits that profile. More than heat, lights, rent, phone, direct and indirect employee expenses. And to put this in perspective, one of our customers is an accounting firm. And I talked to the managing partner and I said, how much does an average customer do with you per month? And he says, well, an average tax and audit customer will spend about $3,000 a month with our firm. That's the guy we're looking for. Well, the follow-on question to that was, how long do you typically keep that customer before they move on or they outgrow? And he said, well, typically people only change their accounting firms every 10 years. So I'm no math major, but that says to me that if a company is going to generate $3,000 a month times 12 months times 10 years, that's a $360,000 opportunity. Because no one changes accounting firms on a whim. I mean, you don't wake up in the morning and say,
Right.
I'm going to change accounting.
Not to pain in the neck.
No, that only happens when certain things are in place.
And I'd say not just one thing, but multiple things. I mean, because it's a hassle to change.
And it's painful. And no one is willing to endure that pain unless there is an overwhelming business reason to do that. You've
Right.
outgrown them, they've screwed up.
I feel the same way with like banking relationships. Banking
Huge.
relationships, accounting,
all of those.
lawyers. I mean, you got confidential information. I mean, yeah.
And it's huge. And so what happens is, if they miss that window of what I call a window of opportunity, where that dissatisfaction has grown to the place that they're not just mildly miffed, they're looking for alternatives. If I miss that window of opportunity, that says to me in the accounting firm that is closed for another 10 years.
Right.
So not only have I missed the opportunity and all the revenue, but this guy is not coming back for maybe never. He's
Right.
never coming back. And so missed opportunity, and we actually help our clients calculate that. That doesn't have to happen very many times in a year for all of a sudden the growth potential of that company to be dramatically hampered.
Right.
In fact, I believe sometimes it causes companies to go out of business.
Can you give me an example of a typical or common problem that you help companies deal with and how you handled it?
Probably a good example is a credit union that does commercial lending and sells investments.
I didn't even know credit unions did commercial lending.
No, and that brings up the really number one challenge that they have. The number one challenge that credit unions that do business lending and investments have is that nobody considers them. I've been a member of a credit union since I was in high school. And since we started this company, I can't tell you how many tens of thousands of dollars that we borrowed on line of credit and expansion,
Sure.
designing software. We never even considered the credit union.
I
They
wouldn't
didn't
have
have top of the mind awareness.
No idea.
And so credit unions have what I call not an identity problem, but an awareness problem, an awareness in the business community. Now, the beauty part about credit unions is they are not accountable to shareholders. They're a membership not-for-profit. So typically their terms will be better, their service is better, it's personal because they exist for their members, not for faraway stockholders and boards of directors that they don't know. So the biggest problem that they have is awareness. So what we do with our credit union clients, as an example, is we will help them build a list of people that they specifically want to do business with.
Okay.
Then initiate a campaign of systematic, persistent contact with those people with the intent of developing top-of-the-mind awareness.
What do those contacts look like?
Well, we believe that you have to use multiple channels of communication. And that is, if you think about it, unless you're going to knock on somebody's door, there's
Right.
only a handful of ways of contacting anyone. You have to send them a letter, you have to send them an email, you send them a postcard, you call them on the phone, the salesperson calls them or whatever that is. And so what we do is we encourage people as they look at a campaign to integrate multiple channels of communication with a consistent message. Again, understanding that it takes 8 to 10 contacts
Right.
just to get somebody.
And that way you don't have all your eggs in one basket.
That's right. And I don't know how, I get some days I'll get as many as 300 emails. And these are all people that I either know or some of them are
Sure.
unsolicited, but I've subscribed to them. I don't have that much time.
Right.
But if I were to get an email, and then I was to get a letter, and then I'm going to get a call, and all of that has been laid out into a strategy. And that's where I think a lot of people really sharp business people screw up, because they tend to overcomplicate marketing strategy. We break marketing strategy down into 4 elements. A strategy.
As I say, because I'd heard about your famous 4 strategy questions. So tell us about your 4 strategy questions.
The first strategy question is, who is the target? And that's really important, because when we get clarity about who the target is, and I know that sounds, but who that prospect that really fits the profile. And let's say for a credit union, it's companies that are small companies that are under $750,000 in revenue, who are within a specific geographic area, and the person that's a business owner is in fact the target. Now we've got clarity about who it is that we're
Sure.
going to actually attempt to attract. Then once we figure out who is specifically that target is, the next step is to create a message that resonates with that target. For instance, with credit unions, the fact that they are not responsible to stockholders or responsible to members, they specialize in personal service, they do a full range of services that they offer, but you are the customer and you are the member. You're an owner.
Right.
That message, and here's what benefits you might expect to receive as a result of becoming a member. So the first one is target, figure out who it is.
Okay.
Design the message that will appeal to this specific.
Probably based around their problems.
Yes, what you do for them, how you fix their problems.
Sure.
Third thing is to talk about frequency. If you have a prospect that is qualified but currently not sales ready, that says to me that there has to be that ongoing, persistent, systematic contact. How many times do you want to contact this prospective member per year? And let's say it's 12.
Okay.
So we want to contact this prospect 12 times a year. The fourth question is, what is the media that you want to use to do that? And that gets into your earlier question. We're going to send 3 emails, we're going to send 3 letters, we're going to send a postcard, the salesperson is going to call twice,
Right.
and we're going to send them a newsletter besides that. Whatever that looks like. But the idea is to have a playbook that gets executed systematically, that everybody comes in the morning and says, what are we going to do today? Oh, I don't know, what do you want to do? No, it's laid out into a playbook. We know exactly what's going to happen, we know when it's going to happen, we know who the target is, and we know what the message is.
Sure. I know you have processes for everything, and I find interesting as I've reviewed your work that the last step in your process is to review and refine before you expand.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your process and why you feel so strongly about that last step?
One of the biggest advantages of having a process and knowing what's working and what's not is that you can stop doing what's not working and you can turn up the volume on what is producing results. As an example, we had a client who was doing about 4 trade shows per year.
Those aren't cheap.
Not cheap, no. About $25,000 per trade show, not including the time out of the field that the salespeople took. I mean, that wasn't even figured in the cost.
Sure.
So $25,000 4 times a year is $100,000.
Sure, easy.
I asked the president, I said, tell me last year, how many closed business orders how much business did this actually generate? And he looked at me, Mason, and he said, I have no idea.
Wrong answer.
Well, I mean, wrong answer, right? He's spending $100,000 and he doesn't know what his ROI is.
Right.
There is no other area that I can think of in his business that he would even consider that to be remotely okay. But to not know. And that's the same with direct mail campaigns. That's the same. Several years ago, we had a client who was spending a lot of money on newspaper ads. They had one of these eye care clinics that does LASIKs, and I'm under non-disclosure, so I can't tell you who it is, but you know who it is. And they had 4 clinics around the metro area, and we determined that almost 80% of their business came from 5 zip codes around each of their clinics, because nobody gets on a car and drives for an hour to go to to buy a pair of glasses.
Right.
So we stopped doing the advertising in the newspaper and the radio ads, and we went to the state of Missouri, and we bought a list of driver's license issuances in those zip codes where their license said they required corrective lens. Now what we did is we turned the focus down on marketing to those people who had a need, and in fact were predisposed because they had that need. The secondary thing we found is in a household where there's one person who requires corrective lenses, there's typically many more.
Right.
So we were able to leverage to dramatically decrease their advertising budget and to dramatically increase their sales because of that focus, because of actually going after people who were most likely to buy what they sold. So
you just really refined that based on what was working, what wasn't, until you were really dialed in.
And a lot of that is getting clarity about who the target is too, and we talked about that in the early part of this discussion, is getting clarity about if you had a magic wand and you could create the ideal prospect, what would that prospect look like?
Right.
Position, size of company, location, whatever that is. Have a clear picture. And don't spend your time, which is the one thing you can't get anything more of, with people that don't fit that profile.
I've respected you for a very long time, appreciated your work, and I know you've been at this longer than you'd probably like to admit, and had me counting years, but of all the advice that you've been given, what do you consider the worst business advice you've ever been given?
Right now, the worst business advice I think there is out there for professional salespeople is that old adage, ABC, always be closing. That old thing, which was pounded in my head from the day I walked in the door, is not only irrelevant, but it's annoying and counterproductive. And I will say to all the salespeople out there and all the managers and coaches that are coaching and managing salespeople, stop doing that.
There's still people out there, still trainers out there teaching old school presentation and hardline closing techniques that, it's like the prospects have never heard this before. They don't know that someone's doing a blatant attempt to manipulate them, and that they're just, and then the sales managers act surprised when the sales reps say they got thrown out of their office.
Yeah, and it's so predictable. And I was on a sales call with a prospect, and he told me, he says, I am so tired of salespeople coming in here, and I know exactly what they're going to say, I know how they're going to say it, and I'm tired of it. So can we just please cut through that? Well, I kind of like that. That's refreshing, and it allows us to get down. And I think that instead of always be closing, what we really ought to be saying is always be listening. Because keep in mind, what we're trying to find out is only 2 things. Where this person is in their buying cycle, and is there a fit between what they need and what I do? Because if those 2 are not in place, nothing else really matters.
I've got one final question for you. Given your experience, if there was one piece of advice that you could give out, what do you think is the most valuable piece of advice you could share with anybody in business or sales?
Design strategies, execute tactics that will put you in front of the buyer when they are ready to buy. Now that sounds like common sense, but that's not how most salespeople sell. Most salespeople, and we're always ready to take a check. I mean, we're always ready to get a deal. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the prospect is ready to do business.
Right.
But design strategies that are non-intrusive, that are not aggressive, that are position you as a trusted advisor, because I really believe that what people are looking for right now is trusted advisors that will help them navigate their buying and implement cycle. And if you can do that for a customer, I don't think you'll ever lack for sales.
I really appreciate you coming in today, Alan.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you. If any of you have questions or would like to know more about what Alan does or how he helps companies work with Salesforce automation, increase the effectiveness of their sales team, and get control over the sales process from a management perspective, then the way to reach Alan is www.frontline-advisors.com. And I hope that they go check you out in his book, Sales Utopia, How to Get the Right People Doing the Right Things Enough Time, is available on Amazon in hard copy. And if you have questions related to how to attract, capture, or convert more of your ideal prospects into customers online, I would encourage you to visit buildatribe.com, where you can get information along those lines, and also check out youtube.com/buildatribe to be able to subscribe, so you can subscribe to any new and helpful videos that come out as soon as they do.
Great.
Thanks so much for coming, Alan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for I enjoyed it.